Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about job security. So let's get into it. So the question was, Frederick, I would like to ask, why don't people take the middle path and do freelancing? You can make two to three times more money and have a lot more flexibility than having a regular software developer's job. And the actual work is exactly the same, or just devs sold the idea of job security by companies? Nope. So usually when people pick something, it's like something that is well, the way that I see it usually is that there are people who feel more comfortable in following well-established routines and sort of the quote-unquote right way of doing things. So an example would be that traditionally people prefer stable routines over uncertainty, as I like to say. The average person does not want to hunt, as I like to call it, for solutions to their problem. They want a finished, safe, low-risk solution to their problem, especially when it comes to survival. This is why you usually have what we call pack mentality, where popular opinion, and this is actually one of the reasons why this cancel culture and all of the things that you see happening in our society today is happening because the average person just wants is the average person is either usually not more intelligent enough to break out and stand on their own, or they're afraid to do so. There's also it's a lot in terms of herd mentality that goes on in people on at large. But when it comes to hunting for things, which is what you have to do basically when you are a freelancer, depending on how you define a freelancer. Now, I just have to say this, guys, there's a difference between, at least in my region, we use different terms for consultant and freelancer. A freelancer is an individual who usually works completely by themselves. They don't like work through agencies or anything like that. It's just a free standalone person, knows some coding, finds their own customers, is their own sort of company, right? Now, in my region, it's very rare that such a person has access to major clients. Usually they have, or rather not, well, they can have access to major clients, but it's not so common for them to have like these high stakes sort of like long spanning projects. It's usually smaller scale for them, which means that of course when you're your own boss and basically you're running your own company, it's exactly the same reason as to why most people prefer to have a stable job rather than start their own company, because the reality is, as I said, that most people don't have that that predator, I'm not saying predator mentality, the routine is more attractive than the risk and potential, as I call it, min-max gaining, or that comes with running a company, as an example. And the same thing goes for freelancing versus having a regular job. Do you want to manage all the complexities of being a freelancer, for example? Do you want to be personally responsible and usually work alone? Because that is a lot of what freelancing at small scale means. You can work in agencies and sort of like have a office and then take on clients and so forth and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're really, in many cases, yes, you can make more money, but you're still not going to get the same experiences as, say, someone who works for a serious software company. Then on the other hand, even if you are working for a software company, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get all these benefits from it. But I hope that I make you sort of see my point. The average software developer, and not just software developer, the average person is after a stable routine, and that is very hard for, there are people who are day traders. The potential earning capacity of people who are really into that sort of stuff is enormous, but most people don't want to, I don't know, become professional poker players, etc., etc. They want stability, routine, this sort of stuff, right? and the sort of jobs where you actually have to risk things on a fairly regular basis is not for everybody. It's that simple. And although you can earn 2 to 3 times as much money, you also have to, in some cases, work a little bit harder to do that. And there are other things that people don't really consider so much when they become consultants and so forth, which it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something worth thinking about. When you work as a freelancer, for example, as I was saying, it's really rare that I find that freelancers who work by themselves due to the fact that they want to maximize their income, that they have worked on large-scale systems and these sorts of more advanced projects. It's actually funny because a lot of the freelancers that I interview, even after 20 years, they're borderline incompetent. And we can't hire them for serious software development. Even if after 20 years they don't possess the necessary skills to actually do any major large-scale software development. They can't lead teams, they can't do architecture or anything of the sort of stuff that someone who has been working for 20 years in a real software company should on average be able to do. It's not many of the people that we have, like some of the best software developers we have outgrown these freelancers after their first 5 to 6 years, because the sort of software development you do at scale in more serious companies is usually more qualitative, if that makes sense. The demands on your work, depending on the company now, of course, because it differs from companies, right, it's higher. It's major leagues versus minor leagues, or like this sort of stuff usually. Consultants is a different beast. If you work as a consultant, it's usually the case that you work through some type of agency, and you're usually just you're not really as one person or two people on one project. You're renting out your hours to companies who are looking for consultants, right? And depending on how you want to define it, that could be a freelancer as well. It's just that in my region we should usually make a distinction between the two, right? And so in that scenario, you can absolutely also, it's very rare that you make like 2 or 3 times the money. I'm not sure where you're getting those sorts of numbers. You're usually being paid a little bit more. Sometimes it can be twice. Most of the time it's just maybe a bump of 20, 30, up to 50% or something like that. It can be, but it is definitely a significant pay increase. The thing that people don't consider so much about that, which may or may not matter to you, is that there is a trade-off for that as well. Consultants are usually looked upon as a short-term investment. Not always. Some consultants stay at the same company for years and years and years and years. But on the other hand, it's rare that companies invest and try to, wants to promote a consultant, as an example. It's rarer that, and when it comes to times to downscale, usually, depending on your labor laws, the consultants are the first to go, and that's why you get that extra money, because you're taking on more risk as the consultant than as the person working in-house. Now, if you play all your cards right, this is basically it's going to be the norm. If you play all your cards right as a consultant, you can absolutely potentially make more money, but your odds of getting to the highest levels of software development, in other words, becoming like a CTO or like these sorts of more advanced sorts of roles, it becomes increasingly difficult for you unless you manage your career correctly. This is true for people who are hired as well, but it's usually more common that companies feel comfortable promoting people who are actually committed to their company. And giving, and in some cases there are some things you are not going to get like benefits and things like that as a consultant, and the value of that is up to you. Like it's as I said, it's really down to how you want to play your career. It's sort of mercenary type of work versus being committed to the army or whatever you want to call it, etc., etc. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why people usually don't take on freelancing or this sort of stuff is risk management. Risk management is the thing that gets people to do most of the things, because the average person wants to have a very stable, well-known routine, and that is more attractive because it gives a sensation of security. more so than min-maxing salaries and other things and going on the hunt, as I call it, because most people don't want to live in a state of hunting for clients or hunting for their next meal, or rather that's the perception, right? They don't have that sort of mentality. Rather, they want a more quiet, stable, low risk environment. And freelancers usually have to hunt in a different sense. There are other ways to look at it. Usually the low-end projects, or like the stuff that a freelancer normally finds themselves doing, might pay better, at least short term. The problem is usually that it's very difficult for a freelancer to get really quality experience and actually get to a point where they're so good at this stuff that they can lead companies and like take on more responsibility as they grow older. They usually stay fairly guys I've done work with people who have 20 years of freelancing work on their CV, and we have not juniors, but we have mid-level software developers who they have to report to because they're basically incompetent. In many cases we can't hire them. That's not always the case, but it is a very real danger when you don't consider long-term growth and like different scales of projects and stuff like that. Consultants, which is we usually make a distinction there, usually rent out their hours to companies rather than just working on projects. Not always the case. They usually are more aligned with, like, they can be very good, have a lot of like the same sort of skills as an in-house employee. The thing that usually makes people go into consultancy work versus working in-house is risk management. That's usually what it comes down to, and commitment to the company, of course. If you're more about money, yourself, your own personal benefits, and you're willing to take on some extra risk and so forth, consultancy work is a very good option. That's definitely one. But working in a company has in many cases certain benefits, such as being more viable for a viable option for promotions, and sometimes they have like things that actually they only give to employees versus consultants. So it's not really the companies who are selling the idea of job security. It's really down to how loyal do you want to be, or in another way of looking at it, how much risk and hunting do you want to take on as an individual. Have a great day.